with the changes in the tax law, we have an exemption today of $5,450,000 per person for the lifetime. It's indexed for inflation. It was a permanent change made in the 2012 Tax Act, which was enacted in 2013 on January the 1st, on New Year's Day. In addition, the tax rate, the effective tax rate for gifts and estates is 40%. And we have permanent portability. So if a spouse does not use the exemption on the death of the first spouse, it's portable as long as an estate tax return is filed to the second spouse. So the second spouse inherits whatever the exemption, unused exemption was on the death of the first spouse. Those are great changes that were made. They also increased the income tax rates in that tax bill, so that the highest effective tax rate is 43.6%, including the Obamacare net investment income tax, federal, plus state income tax. How many of you heard about what Colorado's doing right now in their state income tax? Anybody? 14.3% highest income tax rate is proposed by a petition that was filed by 98,000 people in Boulder, Colorado. And they're going to amend the statute if they get enough votes, obviously, at the legislature. But there's a proposal on the table to do that, which would make it by far the highest income tax rate state in the country. Higher than California, higher than Maryland, which is horrific. Higher than DC. Good old Virginia, we're okay. But income tax and capital gains have assumed much greater importance because of all these changes in the income tax rates. If the Democrats take control of the Congress and the presidency, we know for a fact that the exemptions are going to drop. And the tax rates are going to rise for estates and gifts. Both Sanders and Clinton have said that the gift tax exemption will go from $5,450,000 per person to $1 million per person. And the estate tax exemption will drop to at least $3.5 million per person. If Clinton's elected, she said that the tax rate will go back up to 45%. If Sanders is elected, he said 65%. If the Republicans are elected, they're going to repeal the estate tax. So if they take over, if they retain control of the Congress and the president is a Republican, they are going to repeal the estate tax. It's one of the first things that's going to happen, despite the political storm that will erupt over that on the Democratic side. We have to plan for all of these eventualities. In our documents, we have to have flexibility. So the first thing that you as an advisor are going to do is to look at the documents to make sure that there's flexibility built into the documents. And if you don't think there is, you need to talk to the estate planner about it, that it should be built into the documents. The other thing that we used to do was we used to force assets by a formula allocation, a fractional formula, into credit shelter trust known as the family trust. We call it the family trust. Some people call it the credit shelter trust, the bypass trust, whatever it is. By doing that, you may be doing harm to some of your clients. The uber wealthy, no, but the not so uber wealthy, under $11 million in assets, you may be doing harm to them. Why? Because while the assets in that trust are exempt from estate tax on the death not only of the first spouse, but of the second spouse, those assets do not get stepped up to fair market value on the death of the second spouse. So if there's a large disparity in age between the spouses, or in the time when the first spouse dies and the second spouse dies, so that there could be growth in the assets in the exempt trust, we may have a low income tax basis in that exempt trust, so that when the kids inherit those assets and sell them, we could have a huge capital gain, maybe even ordinary income. Against that, you balance the benefit of exempting the growth in the exempt trust from the estate tax. So what do? We're getting more into the mindset of as long as the two trusts are the same, and this is another issue, they're not always the same. They're not always exactly the same. You might have a marital trust for the surviving spouse that does one thing, and a family trust that does something completely different. But if they're the same, why not put the assets into the marital trust and give the surviving spouse the power to disclaim or push some of the assets into the family trust for her benefit or his benefit after the death of the first spouse. So it's a disclaimer structure. Again, these will depend on every client's situation. There is no cookie cutter approach to this.
Do the assets get stepped up at the first person's death in the family trust?
Yes.
So why would you not still stay with the old version of two trusts?
Because let's say you put an asset that's not growing, it's growing but not particularly rapidly, and there's a 20-year disparity in age, and let's say the combined estate is under $11 million, so putting it into an exempt trust doesn't make any sense in the first place, because we're going to have an exemption that covers the entire estate on the death of the second spouse, but we lose the basis step up in the family trust, whereas we do get a basis step up in the marital trust. So it's a case-by-case counseling-based analysis. You cannot assume anything. You look at each person's situation and you talk to them about their investment strategies. That's your job. About their financial plan. That's your job. I just want to make sure that they have all of those things thought out. That's why we have to work as a team. And then you have to figure out what the income tax strategy is. That's your job, Linda. But I want to be involved so that I have input into that process. If you involve your teammates, it's going to make for a much better estate plan for everybody involved. Again, minimizing expenses, you would think the client's going to go, I got to pay my estate planning lawyer by the hour to do this. Well, we are now adopting, I am adopting a continuum of care approach where we're going to charge a flat fee on an annual basis if the client wants to be part of this approach. The flat fee will include updates to their documents if they want to update certain things like changing a trustee or changing a guardian, which are easy to do, as opposed to changing the way in which the plan works. No, that's going to be an additional fee. But I think clients appreciate the fact that they're not being billed hourly. They like to know that they're getting a fixed fee. So that's how we're approaching it. And from your angle, again, those of you that do bill by the hour, you bill by the hour, but the hope is that the value is far in excess of what the hourly charges are going to amount to, because you're adding value. The goal is to always add value. If I have a client call me up and say, you know what, you sent me a bill for an hour, you didn't give me anything. There's no value that was added. First of all, I probably wouldn't send the bill, but if I did, because the client asked me to spend an hour with them and they were unhappy, I'll write it off. How many estate planning lawyers do you know, how many lawyers will do that? Again, our approach is add value. If you add value, then you can derive value from your client. But it's not all about me, it's about the client. It's making sure that we're helping the client get to where they want to be. And as a team player, team approach, the best teams are the ones that really function together. Look at the Denver Broncos. Their quarterback was disabled, and they won the Super Bowl.